Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? So a couple weeks ago, I threw up the blood signal, inviting you guys to send in some questions so we could do a question and answer kind of video, just kind of a hangout thing. And I wasn't expecting a ton of response. I was thinking, you know what, I'm probably going to have to come up with a few myself, just like, hey, this is something somebody might ask at some point, or maybe even has asked in the past, and either I gave an answer that I didn't elaborate much on, or, whatever. But no, you guys sent in a bunch, and I just wanted to say thank you. That's awesome. So now I can make a lengthy video where I just talk about my comic and myself and greats. We're gonna talk about greats. So let's start off with the Blood Force questions. We might as well. That's the stuff I'm most of an expert in, and there's gonna be a few edits because I have a tendency to stammer, or when I'm trying to think of something to say, just kind of stare off into the distance. I might include one of those in here, just to give you an idea of what you've been missing out on. So first one here. When you were creating Blood Force, was there any character that you wanted to include that you couldn't foot? You see? I couldn't foot it in. Let's try again. When you were creating Blood Force, was there any character that you wanted to include but couldn't fit in? Most of the names I've come up with, there's a few dozen, are scheduled for later down the line. I figure I can come up, and obviously I can come up with different names when as needed. But where was I going with that? But in terms of a guy I wanted to put in that didn't make the lineup, the only one I can think of offhand was the Kickler. The first little lineup I came up with was Hawkstab, Popo, Fireburn, Prima Bomba, kind of like Prima Donna, but with bombs, and the Kickler. And the Kickler was, it's a funny name, and the concept was going to be funny because he was just going to have 4 legs. So you just see him just coming at an opponent, just like, ah. But this was, when I was coming up with this, I was running it by my brother for just, because I do that a lot. He's basically my editor. And he's got a good sense of what works in the context and what doesn't. And he was like, you know what? Kickler is like one standard deviation of absurdity higher than the Blood Force concept. And I was like, shit, I think you're right. Fuck, I gotta get rid of the Kickler. There will be no Popo and the Kickler miniseries. So, yeah, I didn't have anywhere to go with it. And honestly, I can't imagine him being very different from Popo himself, being all grimdark and coming up with these long soliloquies. Meanwhile, he just can't unwrap a Snickers bar, that kind of thing. Okay, how many issues of Blood Force do you want to make, and how many have you actually planned out? Okay, in terms of planned out, I've got the first 5 issues set up as an arc, and I've got each issue plotted out, mostly. I generally don't come up with a script until right before I start, well, a little bit before I start doing the art on it. So that answers that. There's a 5-issue arc that's currently we're in the middle of right now, like almost dead center in the middle of. After that, I do have an awful lot of arcs that I've got ideas for, and I have an idea of how long each arc could potentially be. It's hard to who knows how many of these I'll ever even get to, but theoretically I have enough arcs for maybe roughly 100 issues worth. And it's just like, it's not like I have, issue 6 plot, issue 7 plot, it's more like issue 6 through 8. This is definitely a 3-issue arc where this happens. Then I got a 4-issue, then I got a 3, that kind of thing. And, again, I think some of them I would get to them and think, okay, you know what, this was dumb. Some of them I would probably come up with something else in between. So I think I probably could do 100 issues theoretically. I think I would probably drive myself insane trying to. But hey, we'll see. Okay, so next one, the Blood Force movie. Who would you have direct it? So Sam Raimi, I think. You need to think 90s appropriate to some extent, or early 2000s, I suppose. I think the first name jumped to mind was John Woo, but no, I don't think John Woo would do a great job on that. But no, Sam Raimi did a great job on the Spider-Man series. And the Doctor Strange he did was also very good. And Sam Raimi just has a good eye for comic book type action. What 5 lead actors would you have play the lead parts? Okay, so again, thinking 90s. For Hawkstab, I'll say Batman Forever, Val Kilmer. Because I think he can, in addition to having that leading man look, he can also do like straight man comedy. For, let's say, Shock Block, I'll go Michael Jai White. Because he's got the build, and he can act a bit, and he can do combat. I mean, Shock Block doesn't do a lot of fighting, but he would in the Blood Force movie, I think, if you cast Michael Jai White. Hard, you need somebody big, but, well, you know what? I don't even think you do. You can do him as a CG character. I mean, it is a 90s-esque movie, but we're making it now, theoretically, right? Okay, so I'm fucking it up because it's actors from 1995 or whatever. But no, let's just mix it all up. Why not? So he's a CG character. I liked Sylvester Stallone when he did King Shark. I think that could work out fine, just with a little bit less which is asking Sylvester Stallone to go outside of his wheelhouse. I don't know, maybe the would work. Maxtremus, I'll say mid-90s Pamela Anderson. She's the one who would get cast, so let's cast her. For Fireburn, I'll say either mid-90s Matt Damon or Ben Affleck. They're kind of interchangeable at that point. I think maybe Matt Damon is a bit young. So, Ben Affleck, sure. Why not? Again, he can do that comedy kind of thing. Hey guys, this is Editor Mitch. Just wanted to interject for a sec, say I got that last one wrong. So, Ben Affleck he's a fine choice. I'm sure he would have done an alright job. But when I went back looking for pictures of him, I went looking through Mallrats because that's kind of the era I got stuck in. And realized that there's a better choice in Mallrats, which is mid-90s Jason Lee. Because, Fireburn's kind of a non-character. And so, you can have a square jaw kind of guy, but he's just kind of melt into the background. If you lean more into the comedy side of things, that's probably the best way to cast that one. And Jason Lee can do comedy better than Ben Affleck can, just straight up. And Popo, I'll say, this is a bit off the top of my head, but I'll say Bill Campbell, who played the Rocketeer. I think he can pull it off. Hey guys, EM again. Just wanted to point out, once again, got this one wrong. I think I got kind of 90s tunnel vision on this. So Bill Campbell, again, a fine choice, and I think he would have done a good job. I think the problem is the problem that kind of plagued Bill Campbell's career, which is that he's nobody's first choice. I forgot my original choice for this, which was, he proved that he could do the constantly scowling and the gravel voice and pulling off the gravitas. And that's 2012's Dread's Carl Urban. Basically, you take the helmet off of that character and you put a headband on him, that's fucking Popo. And he kind of knocked that role out of the park. So, that is the correct choice for Popo. All right, moving on. How come we don't see much Valentino influence in Blood Force? The same reason you don't see Valentino influence in anything else. His superhero stuff sucks. Although I will say, in Blood Force issue 3, the character Gunshow, who shows up, he's one of the RoboClone minister's bodyguards. He has that swoopy hair thing that Jim's character Hard Edge has. It is making fun of Jim a little bit, but most of his stuff it's not really worth making fun of. It's just not that kind of thing. What would you do differently if you started Blood Force right now today? Hardest lessons learned. That's a good question. I think probably I'd focus less on the parody now. Like if I were to rewrite issue 1, the parody wouldn't be as strong. I wouldn't be trying so hard for it because there's a good, like the first half of the issue is very pointedly pointing out things where it's like, isn't this dumb that they do this in 90s comics? And I think it could have been a bit more subtle than that. Also, more fights. I have a tendency to not start off an issue with a fight. I try to fit. I'm definitely, if there's a rule that there has to be a fight in every issue, if for no other reason than to keep me interested in drawing it. It's like, oh, I'm going to get to that fight. But no, it's better to start off. And I didn't know about the splash, double splash as a trope. So, and I'm definitely going to take more advantage of that going forward. I could see how that would have been used in Blood Force issue 1 and 2 more. Well, at least in Blood Force issue 1. I don't know about number 2. And hardest lessons learned, maybe photocopy more. Just because of my proclivity for doing the comedic shot where everything's pretty much the same from panel to panel except for a slight difference. It would have been easier if I'd done that with a photocopier. And let's see, who would win in a last artist standing match between Dan Fraga, Chap Yape, and Merritt? Which of them would you want to see working on an issue of Blood Force? You must choose. Out of the three of them, I'll take Chap Yape. Dan Fraga is a close second. Merritt is a distant third. There is that impulse to go, yeah, no, I want Merritt Michaels drawing an issue of Blood Force. That'll be hilarious. I don't think it will. I think it'll just look like shit. Chap Yape can actually draw. Dan Fraga too, although his stuff, it's not as much to my taste. The problem is I don't think I can afford Chap Yape or Dan Fraga because they're animation guys now. Merritt might be the one I can afford. Will we see a contest to create the next Blood Force character? And how many pages before the winning character is killed? I'm down. I mean, if you guys want to do that, I'm absolutely down. The only problem, I think, is that I don't really have a place to fit it in the next three, the end of this issue or the next two. After that, yeah, I could see it. And that next bit is a 3-issue arc. I could see fitting a guy in and killing him off before the end of that arc. So that'd be fun. I mean, if you guys want to take part in that, let me know in the comments below. There'll be plenty of things where I'm like, let me know in the comments below. But that is one of them. Okay, what are your favorite 90s comics tropes? Most of them. I like the splash, double splash a lot. Or even just the setup page double splash. And I keep trying to remind myself to use it. I love shiny covers. I'm still a sucker for that shit for some reason. Not 12 anymore, but it still works. I like the over-designed costumes. What I miss most about the 90s is stuff like the focus on art. It seems like Image completely broke the big two to the point where they don't want to focus on art and build up an artist's name for fear of them walking off, whatever project and going and working for themselves. It's like they could do that now anyway. It's just that, you're not helping them out in any way and you're not helping yourself out in sales. That's another thing about the 90s I miss is books selling or the newsstand, being able to buy comics like anywhere. Here's a good one. Which early Image comic had the most promising concept, the most potential only to be wasted? So thinking about it, you think about it in terms of creator. Nothing by Jim Lee. Not that, he maximized potential or anything. Just his ideas were, they're whatever. It's rogue agents they're fighting a secret war against aliens. It's fine, but it's not, it's not like it's anything new. Cyberforce is almost the exact same thing. Only they're rogue mutants fighting a secret war against a company. I'm good. Wetworks, I think he actually kind of did maximize it in the sense that it's fucking crazy. I don't know what else you do with T-1000s versus vampires. That's it, right? Pit, idea's kind of dumb. Shadowhawk, idea's kind of dumb. And Dragon, I think, has been maximized. As much as, you got a super-powered guy. What can we do with that? Eric Larson's kind of done all of it. Spawn, I don't know. I don't think it was a particularly interesting concept, but he's gotten 350 issues out of it somehow. So that leaves Liefeld. And I think you could say, yeah, that's probably where we're going to find our best examples. Youngblood, where it's more of a focus, the original idea of it being superheroes as celebrities, which has been done a lot since. You think of stuff like The Boys. I think X-Force did it once or twice. I'm sure it's been done a ton ever since then, but in 92, it was kind of a new idea. and he didn't really do much of anything with it. Also, Bloodstrike, with the resurrected superheroes that you could continually resurrect. It was pointed out that that's essentially Universal Soldier, but you don't see it with superheroes. I don't think I've seen it at all since then. And we did see a little bit of Keith Giffen trying to mess around with it and bring some interesting ideas to the fore. And he only got 3 issues to work with before, or, maybe he got sick of it. I have no idea. We can't ask him anymore. But yeah, I'll say those. Brigade and Youngblood, probably the best examples. Which Liefeld comic is his best work? In terms of the art, I'll say Youngblood number 3, probably. It's still not great. Like, there's a lot of problems with it. But that's, I think, the stuff where he's putting in the most effort. In terms of the stuff that is the most fun to read, probably, is it Blood Wolf? Yeah, it is. Okay. Yeah, because that seems like the one where he's having the most fun. He actually seems like he's having a good time. In terms of the concept, there is no concept. It's just, I'm going to do Lobo. And that's it. But no, he's actually like, having fun with the pages and like with the artwork, which you don't really see from Rob. You see him kind of going through the motions a lot. Now let's follow this up with, why is Liefeld? I think that the universe conjured him. Or maybe it's better to say the 90s conjured him. We needed something more extreme and neon, and it all kind of just actualized in this singularity. And from there, Rob Liefeld was spawned. In terms of why is Liefeld popular, no fucking idea. Nostalgia. Is the Comics Code still around? I think McFarlane wanted to go this route in Spawn. I thought he didn't because of the code. The Comics Code is not... I mean, technically it actually kind of is. Briefly, the Comics Code came around because in the 50s, Frederick Wortham started a witch hunt, which led to Senate hearings investigating comics. And particularly EC comics, because they were all about crime and horror comics at the time. And the Senate hearings didn't really lead anywhere. There weren't any conclusions drawn, but in the wake of them, the comic industry volunteered the Comics Code. And basically it was a way for them to sanitize their own products so that the Senate would never look into them again. And also, kind of surreptitiously, as a way to get EC Comics out of business. Because you look through those things, and there's all sorts of stuff in there where it's like, you can't have horror in the title. You can't have crime in the title. You can't feature vampires or werewolves or ghosts or whatever the fuck. And it did its job because Bill Gaines had to close down EC Comics and then focus on his next thing, which was Mad Magazine. And from there, the code kind of stuck around as just this. I mean, I'm sure that the retail chains that were buying comics at the time didn't mind the Comics Code existing because it meant that they didn't have to check and do any kind of quality check to make sure that nothing was slipping through. If it passed the code, that meant it was pablum, so it's fine to put out. You do see some examples of companies sort of just negating the code or circumventing it. In the 70s, there's a 3-issue storyline in Amazing Spider-Man where Harry Osborn is addicted to pills that the code wouldn't approve because under the code at the time, you weren't allowed to reference drugs in any way. And Marvel just went, meh. And they sent it out anyway. And I think it did fine because, up to that point, Spider-Man had built up enough goodwill. They built up a reputation. You knew what you were getting in a Spider-Man comic. And then shortly after that, DC first complained, hey, you can't do that, Comics Code. And then when they found out nobody cared, they quickly followed suit with that famous issue by Neil Adams of Green Lantern, Green Arrow, where Speedy's like a heroin addict or some shit. And he keeps kind of carrying on. It would get lessened, I think later in the 70s, actually, where they took off a lot of requirements, which would allow Marvel and DC to just kind of, just show more shit, show more interesting stories. And, they would also start putting out like prestige edition graphic novels, that kind of thing, that were outside of the code because, you couldn't sell them to convenience stores. They were just for the direct market, essentially. And then in 2001, Marvel submitted an X-Force book, which apparently was sent back by the Comics Code. And they're like, nope, change it. And Marvel's like, no, fuck you. I think because at that point, comics were out of the newsstand. It was, there was no mass market for comics to have to worry about. Everything was going to the direct market. So, I mean, what exactly are you guarding against at that point? So they just didn't bother. DC would hang on until 2011, apparently. So just another 10 years. I don't know if they thought that was a point of pride or something. But, yeah, they stuck around. And then, yeah, they eventually went, okay, forget it. And the last one to hang on to the Comics Code, I think, was Archie, which was a day later, actually, which rendered the code defunct. And since then, the Comics Code has actually been intellectual property of the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, which has railed against it in the past. So I think they kind of bought it up so that nobody would ever try to instill it again, essentially. At least not in that particular form. If it's a different kind of rating system, then that's what it is. But you don't have that kind of history to draw on anymore. As far as Image goes, I would think the first few things that came out from Image were a fair bit bloodier than what was going out from Marvel at the time. And I don't believe they carried the Comics Code. And they still did okay. They didn't stick around on the newsstand for long. I remember the first 4 or 5 issues of Spawn going onto the newsstand. And that maybe being about it. And same with Savage Dragon. All right, here's a bit of a change of pace. What are your favorite metal bands? Honestly, most of them are the ones I listened to when I was 20. So, I mean, Metallica, Master of Puppets is kind of infinitely re-listenable. There's a fair bit of Megadeth that I still like. I loved White Zombie at the time. I can still listen to it and enjoy it, although it kind of sucks that Rob Zombie's kind of turned into a douche. Although maybe it's just that he was always a douche and we just didn't have a way to know. I went through a period in the late 90s where I started investigating a lot of metal bands. Didn't find a whole ton that I was really all that into. I got a Tiamat album and Fear Factory. I think I got a couple of albums from them. And Danzig, the 4th album was pretty good from what I remember. I got, actually this leads into your next question, but I got the Best of the Beast, the Iron Maiden compilation, and got a couple of Bruce Dickinson CDs, and they were pretty great. And I'll just read out that other question now. Bruce Dickinson just released the first track off his new solo album. Have you heard it, and what do you think? It was okay. It didn't blow my socks off or anything. I'm not a big fan of 8-minute songs unless it's really, really good. Again, you get to something off of Master of Puppets. Most of that shit I can listen to for a while. And the only other one I can think of offhand is Beast in Black, which is the only new one, really. And they do power metal shit. But not only that, they do it with it's tongue-in-cheek power metal. They know it's cheesy, and they kind of wear their comic book influence on their sleeve. I think I said in the interview, they were the guys who made it were big fans of the Berserk manga, and you can see it in the songs. Shit like Die by the Blade, or No Surrender, or all that kind of shit. And it's completely over the top and really good. I got introduced to them from a guy at work, and he brought it up, and he's a bit of an awkward guy, but and I wasn't expecting much, And then he started playing some of From Hell with Love, which is the title track for their second album. And once the guitars kicked in, I'm just like, oh, wait, what? And then it kind of kept going until the chorus was just like, oh shit, I gotta look that shit up. And I did. And most of the songs on that album are kind of fucking great. So, and I do love it, and I will just play it nonstop. And now for the questions about greats, the greatest questions you have ever heard. Hey guys, if you haven't been watching the live streams, you might be wondering what the fuck is going on with the greats. So the greats started when I was doing, let's see, page 13 of issue 3. So this one here. And this particular panel probably took me an hour and a half or 2 hours or something. And it's it's one of the few panels where I've spent a shit ton of time on it. And it ended up looking pretty good. And we were getting, the live stream was getting a little bit snarky while I was doing the great panel. And then I think on the next live stream, it got brought up again. And it just kind of snowballed to where it's now a running gag. And I feel like it's going to be a running gag until I happen to hit a live stream where the people who make the great jokes all happen to be sick at the same time. And then, you know, they'll come back the next week and you know, start making great jokes. But what are you talking about? We got past that. We're done. So, in the spirit of the live stream, these are comments about greats. If you want to join in on the great commentary, pop it on the live streams. I do one every Sunday at 10, somewhere between 10 and 11 a.m. usually. And now for the questions about greats, the greatest questions you have ever heard. What is it like working directly with the greats? This is lightning round, by the way. Grading. Will you be working with them again anytime soon? Yes, page 25. I mentioned this on the last live stream. There's going to be a scene where the clerk are coming back to... They've got to execute Popo. They don't realize that he's escaped and has gotten access to some guns. So they got to wander. But they're, you know, the lead up to them going back to the torture room is going to be like, you know, low angle stuff with guys walking down the hallway of a Klingon ship kind of thing. Like you can hear the clanks. Why do you hate trees? Because they're evil. Why do you think dogs pee on them? Will we get a great spin-off series? You know what? You can be my merit on that. I'll come up with the concept, whatever the fuck that is, and then I'll push that off on you. All right? And like Chris can write it, and Raven can draw it, or vice versa. You guys can both draw, so it works out. And then, yeah, we put that shit out in the world. I collect 45% of the profits as the creator, and we're all happy. If you were stuck on an island, would you rather be stuck with Cyber's dreads, the hamster wheel, or the grate? Assuming this is like a tropical island, grate and the dreads, well, the grate is no good because that'll get superheated. You can't use it as a raft or anything, and, you know, it'll sink. Cyber dreads, you imagine having, like, metal dreads on a tropical island? Having that heavy shit stuck to your head and burning you? No, thank you. The hamster wheel is from an alien product of some kind of material, which could be buoyant. So potentially could be used as a raft. I guess it's more of a giant-sized life preserver. But I think that's probably your best bet. Also, I mean, you know, you could just like prop it up and maybe use it for shade. Who knows? And it's fairly big, so it might be, you know, kind of visible, more visible from a distance. Definitely hamster wheel. All right, and we get some process questions, kind of. Okay, you mentioned a while ago that you don't like to ink in the computer. How come? Just learning something new. I've always just done pencil, pen, and ink kind of stuff. I've never had great equipment for doing computer stuff. I do have a tablet at the moment that theoretically I could use. The problem is it's not one of those tablets where it's a screen, so I'm not seeing what I'm drawing as I draw it, like right under the stylus or whatever. So I'm like, you know, drawing down here and looking over here and having to make the leap, and I can't do it right now. I mean, maybe one day if I ever do get one of those kind of tablets, but, you know, I enjoy the process anyway of pen and ink and paper. It's not really an ideal kind of thing. I don't think of it as like, this is the hill I'm dying on. It's just, I know my way around these particular materials, and I don't have some of the materials I would need, and I don't want to spend the time having to learn. Like, doing all the videos takes up a shit ton of time. Have you ever colored any of your work? If so, can we see examples of that work? That's a quick answer. No. Not no, you can't see them. No, I have never really colored anything. I grew up reading a lot of black and white comics, and it kind of stuck in my head as this is, even, you know, like not black and white superhero comics necessarily, but it's just kind of stuck in my head. Like, no, I mean, I draw in black and white, and, you know, somebody else can figure out the color shit. I don't know. Like, to this day, I don't really know what color the costumes on the Blood Force guys are. I have an idea, mostly thanks to my brother who has colored a bunch of them. So in case you're wondering, Hawkstap is red. Shock Block, I think of as mostly blue. I think part of the problem is that they're kind of template characters anyway. They're often taken off of existing designs. So when I think of like Fireburn, I'm mostly thinking of Warblade. And, you know, you can add some colors to them here and there, but that's kind of where I'm going. Okay. Have you ever worked with anyone on a project? Penciler, inker, colorist, or writer before? Or do you prefer to do everything yourself? I don't know anybody else who will do it, to be honest. I have never inked anybody else's work. I have almost never gotten anybody else to ink my work. I have a couple of close friends who have, you know, occasionally done stuff. And it's cool to see it. But I do very little pencils. And I have more fun playing around with the ink anyway. And I've never... I did try briefly working with my brother as a writer. And it kind of, you know, and it was great for a while. But then it kind of petered out because we're both bad at sticking with projects. I think the only reason Blood Force has stuck around so long is because I've set myself up the schedule where I do the live streams with 1 page a week. And I have to be there for the live stream because that's what my calendar says. You know, so I sit down there and I crank a page out and it's like, yeah, no, these pages keep getting produced and it's still fun to do. So, yeah, no, it's just, I've never really known anybody who wanted to collaborate. I'd do it. It's just, you know, it hasn't come up yet. From your Instagram posts, you have a great style for non-superhero or extreme type comics. Thank you, by the way. I appreciate that. Any plans to put that talent to use in a different comic, like in a horror or Conan-ish fantasy genre comic? I would definitely, I'd like to try. It'd be cool. The only thing is I can't write it. The comic I'm producing now, this is pretty much the only kind of comic I can write. You know, which is a bit of an indictment. But that's how it is. I can do goofy superhero shit, and I can kind of keep doing that for a while. I haven't had any problems with it, which is actually another question down here. Do you get writers or artists block working on Blood Force or any of your past endeavors? If so, how do you deal with it? I haven't had writer's block with Blood Force yet. That said, I've only written 3 issues. So, I mean, we'll see. But like I said, I do have a lot of arcs set up. And if you can get the arc set up, then I can just kind of fuck around within the frame and just like, you know, okay, what happens? What's the logical things that need to happen to get me to the next part of the arc? And then from there, it's like, okay, so what are the particulars that'll make it a bit more interesting? In terms of working out of writer's block, man, I don't know. I mean, in the past, when I've tried to write something else and I get writer's block, I usually give up. I'm bad for that. So yeah, this is kind of why I knew this was going to be a thing I was going to work on for a while, is just because I was able to finish writing multiple issues and enjoy it after it was written. I still like these issues. I don't think there's a ton I would change. There's little bits I would change, but you know, in terms of artist block, I will say, it's not been that much of a problem. I will just kind of go through the motions on a page sometimes, and I'm not happy about that. I'm usually not happy with the end product. But one of the things about my particular deal is that I'm constantly looking at new references, new sources of inspiration with the revisits, and, you know, constantly finding new ideas I kind of want to try to apply. So, I mean, just read a ton of comics, I guess, would be the best way for that. So maybe the same thing for writer's block. You know, read a bunch of short stories or novels or, you know, whichever. And, yeah, maybe try to, I don't know. I was like, gonna give advice. I don't think give advice. I'm, you know, this particular deal for me is kind of unique in that it's just like, this is the only thing I can do. And I don't seem to have any problems doing it. So hopefully that'll be the case going forward. Oh, and yeah, once again with the other kinds of comics, like again, if I met a writer who was like, yo, I got this Conan comic or this horror comic, I would love to do a horror comic, I think. And really like milk the shadows. I think that'd be pretty sweet. It's just, yeah, I can't write one myself. If anybody approached me with like, hey, I've got this idea, do you want to try it out for like a 1 or 2 issue deal? I'd absolutely try that shit out, particularly if I was getting paid. I would be down. Do you have any education in art, or are you self-taught? Self-taught. I never did any art school type stuff. Mostly all done through... I'm just constantly reading about making comics. So like there's all sorts of books that I've used over the years. The Scott McCloud books are always great, understanding comics and more so making comics. I've enjoyed that one quite a bit. There's that one book, what's it called? It's like Drawing Words and Writing Pictures, I think. Which had a lot of pretty good information in it that was useful. There's stuff like, we had a Bern Hogarth book for dynamic figure drawing. I've got a bunch of art books actually that I've bought over the years and looked at, and sometimes they're useful, and a lot of times they're not. And it's like, wow, that was $50 because cheap art books aren't really a thing, unfortunately. But yeah, no, it's just kind of been shit I picked up over the years. A lot of YouTube videos too. I think the problem is that I don't have a good memory for, like, a lot of them are like, here's a formula for how to draw a thing, and it never sticks, and it fucking gets on my nerves. So it on every page there's an awful lot of improvisation. I will say that. It's just that I have read an awful lot. I've made a fair amount of comic book pages over the years now, like a couple hundred. It's not a huge amount. Like any kid who has been, who churned out a bunch of comics in their childhood could say that. But one of the things is, the more pages you do, then you learn to identify where your weaknesses are and your strengths, and you can work on changing aspects. And if okay, finish the page completely. If it sucks, okay, cool, put it aside, work on the next page. Don't redo that page. That page sucked, leave it alone. Are you getting paid for this? If you are, then maybe redo that page. But if you're not, just keep working, do the next page, and keep working on stuff that you don't know how to draw, I'd say. And just like you by continually trying to draw that stuff, you find ways, or you just learn that you shouldn't draw that stuff. What inspires you to create and tell the stories you have done thus far? I haven't done a ton of stories, and they're mostly based off of these revisits I do, where it's like, man, these stories suck. That's the biggest thing takeaway I got from doing the early revisits. Because I look back on the 90s Image stuff with some fondness, but nothing about the stories stuck. And then I reread them, and it's like, oh, this is why. Because the writing is terrible. It's like, so a lot of the art is very good, but it's completely unsatisfying because there's no interesting narrative. There's no interesting characters. There's no twists that are interesting. So that was something that kind of impressed on me early on was, okay, you can do this parody thing, but don't just do it as a straight parody of an Image book, or, okay, if you can do great Image style art, good. If you can make it funny, good. But if it doesn't go anywhere, then it's not going to leave a lasting impression. And I'm not going to say that the story I've got is great or intricate or even particularly creative, but it is reasonable. It is a decent story insofar as construction is concerned. There are a couple of twists that you can probably see coming a mile off. That's okay. But just having that there as like a template and then putting all that extra stuff on top, I think makes something better than your average Image comic. So am I saying that Blood Force is better than your average 1992-93 Image comic? Yeah, I guess I am. It is to me. It's the comic I would read in 93. What other stories do you want to tell after Blood Force? Man, as it is, I'm going to be drawing Blood Force until I die. Unless this somehow becomes self-sufficient and I can start churning out stories like churning out issues once a month or once every 2 months. Once every 2 months would probably be more realistic. Unless I get a better idea that will make me money. I don't really have anything else. I've had other comic ideas, and I'm not much of a writer, to be honest. So like having something where I'm like, yeah, no, this is fun and I enjoy every bit of it. This has been the first time, and I'm fucking 45. So no, I don't really have anything else planned at any point. Um, if I ever do something other than Blood Force, I think it'll probably be as an artist working with a different writer. What kind of stories interest you as a creator and or a fan of comics, books, film, or TV? I would say sci-fi stuff is a big one, but not like hard sci-fi. Usually more mashup kind of stuff. So sci-fi thriller, sci-fi horror, sci-fi action, sci-fi comedy. I'll go with that too. So, you know, you get stuff like Terminator or RoboCop. I've talked about those before. You get stuff like Galaxy Quest. You get stuff like Edge of Tomorrow. Like, you know, I don't know. If you add sci-fi to just about any kind of genre, you just make a better genre. What practices in comics do you disagree with or recommend? Such as photocopying or tracing or things like that. Things like photocopying can be useful. I like to pick it out because it's interesting to see when it's being used as a time-saving thing or sometimes as a story element. Again, if in comedy, that can be done where you do the repeated image and you just change something slightly. Tracing, I mean, obviously swiping is not okay, particularly if you're not crediting your swipes. If you're doing the whole homage thing where you do, you know, after whoever, it's acceptable. I think it's a little bit, well, you know, I mean, I think it's fine probably, so long as you don't overdo it. But out and out tracing, I don't have a huge problem with it, I suppose. Again, as long as you're not tracing artwork. If you're just tracing off of an existing image, like lightboxing, I think that's okay generally, although it does tend to lead to pretty sterile comics. You know, I think lightboxing backgrounds is fine usually because they don't have that kind of interaction. Lightboxing figures can be okay if you don't overdo it, but if that's like your main source, or just like photoshopping, you know, like using that as a template and then drawing over it, I'm not as big a fan of that. That does feel more like cheating, and it feels like something Rob does often. Aside from that, I don't like the current trend of digital comics, everything being drawn digitally, where you don't use an inker. I miss the days of having designated pencilers and inkers. I think inked comics just look better. And if you're not inking, you're just kind of leaving everything up to the colorist. I don't know, everything, it makes everything look similar. And that's the thing with like Marvel Comics these days. Nothing stands out. Nothing looks better than anything else. It's all just kind of this wash of crazy looking colors. And like, it's the equivalent of something like, well, I mean, you take like the Star Wars prequels, like the last two or something, where it's just digital effects everywhere. And you get to a point quickly where digital effects stop being impressive. That's kind of the effect you get when everything is computer colors and everybody's trying to outdo each other with the crazy computer color shit. Is eventually you stop giving a shit. How do you find it balancing Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and Patreon? Difficult, actually. I did not have any kind of social media presence before Blood Force. I had a Twitter account I would look at like once or twice a day. I didn't use Instagram at all. You know, I was on YouTube a bunch, but yeah, no, and as a result, I find that I have difficulty keeping up with it. I used to be like, man, social media manager is such a lame, like 21st century job title. No, I could probably use one of those, actually. I can see the need for it. As a result, what's kind of been happening is I tend to focus on one because I don't, you know, I can't multitask the social media stuff. So Twitter, I basically just use to tweet out links to my revisits. Instagram, I took part in Inktober, and I think I've put up a couple of drawings since, but I can't get invested in it the way I do the YouTube stuff. The YouTube stuff feels like the focus of all of the stuff I'm doing these days. And Patreon, like, you know, I have some Patreon exclusive content, but I'm always thinking I haven't made enough and I'm not involved enough over there. There's not a ton of people signed up for it, so that's probably part of why. But yeah, no, I would like to do more Patreon stuff at least. But yeah, no, man, it's tough. Have you thought about starting a Blood Force Discord where people can interact, ask questions like these for more videos, and post fan art? I think I considered it briefly, and just it's one of those things where I thought about it and went, hey, maybe that's an idea, and then I just never went back to it. I'm down. I mean, if you guys want to do that kind of thing, let me know. I don't know how often I'd stop in. I'm not a huge Discord user. But yeah, no, if you guys want to, like, I've noticed there's a particularly snarky element to the people who watch my videos, which I think I've probably engendered a little bit. I feel like, we have similar tastes in some regards. Yeah, if you guys want to do a Discord thing, yeah, I can start that up. Just, again, let me know in the comments. Oh, here's another one. Are there any Canadian comics out in the world worth a look? So that is a multi-layered question, I feel like. In terms of, are there any, because it depends on how you interpret it, I suppose. If we're thinking about comics produced by Canadian creators, I mean, there's a few bigger names. You think Todd McFarlane, Dale Keown, John Byrne. None of them are really producing comics that much anymore. And, I mean, do the comics they produce count as Canadian comics? Probably not, because they're American companies, right? So from there you go, you're thinking mostly independent. And these days, I mean, there's just like, it seems like thousands of independent comics. Like, you go from everything being kickstarted or zooped or whatever to just online comic blogs to, I mean, I don't know. There's just so many. I can't even keep track. And when I do find one, I'm often not looking at where they're from. The only one I can think of offhand for that kind of thing is James Edward Clark, who does Pissant Apocalypse. He had a Kickstarter a little while back, and his stuff looked pretty cool. He also did the art for Tales to Enlighten, which was another self-published book written by Matt King, which I read for when I was doing the Inktober Challenge, and that was one of the prompts. And that is something else. And he's a hell of an artist, though. And I imagine his book is probably pretty good, because he seems like a smart and funny dude. So after that, I don't know a lot of older independent Canadian comics. Back in the 90s, there were a couple I would pick up regularly. So like Thieves and Kings or Lethargic Lad. I believe the guy who does that is Canadian as well. Dress for Success. That was more of a mini comic. And those were all pretty good to varying degrees. Not that I've kept up with them over the last 30 years. And the only other one I can think of offhand, which is everything else has been kind of dancing around, is Cerebus by Dave Sim. I'll give you just a brief rundown, because I do actually have a video coming out probably in a few weeks where we're going to go do Spawn number 10, which is the crossover between Spawn and Cerebus. And I actually brought a buddy in on that, and we had a pretty long discussion about Cerebus over the course of that video. But Cerebus was a black and white independent that started up in 1977. Started out as a Conan parody featuring a funny animal character, which was Cerebus the Aardvark. And like I said, started out as a parody, but kind of quickly morphed into something else as Dave Sim became more of a confident comic book artist, I think. So he would start working in elements where he would do basically satire or commentary on things like politics, religion. Male-female relationships was a big one. And somewhere in probably the first couple of years, he decided that it bothered him that comics didn't make any sense as a coherent story. Like, if you picked up all of Action Comics in 1977, 78, 79, whenever he decided this, they don't make any kind of sense as a life. And it's like, well, no, of course they don't. That wouldn't make any sense. Even at that point, Action Comics have been around for like 40 years. And you're talking multiple creators over multiple decades, probably, different people working as the publisher, different sort of company directives or directions that they're trying to get. So it would be unreasonable to expect anything else. But as an independent creator making his own comic, he could guarantee that his comic went in a specific direction. So what he decided was that Cerebus was going to be a single story all the way through, focus specifically on the title character, would run for 300 issues. It would follow him through every stage of his life after the first issue, which I think he was in his early 20s then, which Dave was also, and would end in issue 300 with the character's death. And that's what he did. And it's sort of a singular achievement that nobody really talks about because, because Dave Sim himself became a very objectionable figure. He has some very controversial views on women, which would become more prevalent in the comic as it progressed. But I mean, the first 150 issues of that, I think I would recommend to just about anybody. The next 50, so 150 to 100, are a good wrap up, but it does get bogged down in Dave's view of women, which just doesn't jibe with where society was going, really. And then the last 100 are kind of a slog, but at that point I was invested. One of the things is that, well, for instance, Dave Sim himself has said that he owes a lot to Barry Windsor Smith because that was the guy that he was trying to emulate when he first started out in comics. I think in much the same way, I owe a lot to Dave Sim, where reading Cerebus at that particular age really kind of shaped my view of how to make comics. And, you know, for better or worse. So I won't make any harsh judgments on the guy. Like I said, the comic itself is very difficult to recommend to anybody, unfortunately, considering it is. Like, it's a really good comic. And again, for that first 150 or so issues. But yeah, no, I can't recommend it to anybody because of just the way his views took it over and just what those views were. But that's how it goes. And we'll wrap up. This one here. Have you made or attempted to make any other comics? If so, can we see some examples of that work? So yeah, I'll put up. I'm going to do this separately, but I'll show you a few of the pages that I still have from previous attempts. Not really other completed stories, because I didn't do that. Never did that. But but they are at least various attempts at, you know, either starting a series or doing a submission or just fucking around with a storyline, that kind of thing. So I'll do that here. All right, so the first stuff I should start out with here will be from the first comic I really completed, actually, is going to be Blood Run #1. So this was done, helpfully I wrote the date I completed it on the back. I don't do that anymore because I, you know, have timestamps and shit. But this was completed July of 1995. I would have been just shy of my 17th birthday. And my buddies and I, so Jay, our buddy Ryan, and myself decided we were going to put together some like mini comics to try and put out. And this was my attempt. This is Blood Run, which was future-y superhero stuff. The Blood Run was is like a death trap dungeon kind of deal where people with superpowers would run through it. You get 20 at a time, and they hunt each other down, kill each other off until there was only one person left. And then that person, you take that person and you put them in with the team, and you take the next person and all that, etc. So at the time of the comic, there's 7 people on the team now. And they're a government strike force, I suppose. Again, I was 17. Wasn't very good at coming up with concepts. And I'm not going to show too much of this, partially because it's embarrassing. Also because all this stuff that I'm going to show here is available on my Patreon, actually. There is one that isn't, and I'll show that pretty much in its entirety. So yeah, there's a revisit of Blood Run #1 on the Patreon, if you want to go check that out. And this was page 1, and you can see here, little ambitious in terms of number of panels. I remember this panel in particular being a problem. I mean, there's not exactly a ton of fucking detail on here. You can see I'm obsessed with Cerebus crosshatching at this point, like Gerhard crosshatching, to the point where, you know, just black almost doesn't exist on the page. And when it does, it stands out and looks weird. But at this point, I hadn't learned how to draw most things, I would say. Up until this, I wasn't really drawing any comics. I was drawing a lot of pinups and character designs. So, and this panel here came where I had to draw somebody from a reverse angle at like a 3/4 view. And I'm just like, I don't know how to draw an arm from that position. And like, just like, what do I do? And I had to like figure it out. And there was going to be a lot of that over the course of the next little while. Is there another good page in here? I mean, I'm not particularly fond of any of these. It's just that, you know, they're historical now, and I'm a bit of a pack rat. So like, trying for interesting shots. Again, like black would have been more handy in a lot of these situations, particularly like this panel here. This is somebody turns on like a light and to reveal that he's being surrounded, which isn't bad. And I mean, like some of the execution here is terrible, but again, it would have worked a lot better with some black and without these sharpied in flashes here. Like just leave it with just the light illuminating things. That would have looked a lot better. But trial and error, and I don't think I would have tried that again. And I think I was a little proud of this shot here because I got kind of fine on the cross hatching. And here's the cover for Blood Run #2, which would have been done the following summer. I was a fan of floating heads and didn't really know how to integrate them properly. There is some black on the cover, though, so that's something. I don't think I still have the cover for issue 1 anymore. It seems to have gone completely missing. Oh, yeah, this was a bit I liked. This was a sequence where 2 members meet an arms dealer for whatever fucking reason. Arms dealer gets assassinated. Blood Run gets, Blood Run. I forget what they're called almost. I have a tendency to call them Blood Force. Gets ambushed. So one of them here flips up the table. The other one grabs the arms dealer's suitcase, and he's supposed to go running. And yeah, just tons of cross hatching. I still have this problem here with giving people no chin. I'm always kind of aware of it. And so, yeah, this dude runs off. I get to spread out a panel over 3 panels with him leaping over the balcony here and landing on the floor below, which is a shot I was rather pleased with. And then you get this bit here where I didn't understand the XY axis. So guy sneaks up behind him. What it's supposed to be is that he leaps on him and then goes flying over. But it looks like he jumps and then falls back exactly where he was. And then, hey, like a shot of some dude getting shot in the head. And look at how good that looks with some black in there. Wouldn't that be good if you repeated that? And yeah, so we can move on from Blood Run now. We'll move on to the next thing, which was done almost 10 years later. It looks like this was April of 2004. This was an attempt at a submission where I came up with a zombie comic. Can you even get the whole thing in there? Just about. So yeah, I came up. This is kind of tentatively titled City of the Dead. I never did come up with a better name for it. And this is a bunch of dudes stuck in a city that's overrun by zombies. And they're attempting to make their way out. I'm pretty sure they kind of didn't. But learn to ease back from the cross-hatching at least. Learn to try and get more black in there. Try and work on my shadowing a bit, which is kind of coming along. And this particular story, you might think, oh shit, man, like zombie stories in 2004. Yeah, that was kind of riding the wave, wasn't it? No, it wasn't actually. At this point, zombies were not popular. I was just a fan of the George Romero series. And I'm like, you know what? I think I could do a Night of the Living Dead type zombie story. Why don't I try that? And, put together like a full 6-issue script, which sucked. But, I did it. And started putting together submission type stuff. And then in quick succession, you get Dawn of the Dead remake and Land of the Dead coming out same year, I think. And I'm like, oh shit. Well, that's, well, they did a bunch of stuff that I did, but a lot of it was kind of untouched. So maybe that's okay. And then Shaun of the Dead came out, which was essentially my book only 1,000 times better. And I went, well, fuck. And at that point, zombies became kind of insanely popular, and now they're becoming, cliche. So it's, give it another 5 years and you'll be able to do a decent zombie story again without people going, rolling their eyes. But yeah, I kind of, I just shelved that story. And then maybe, I don't know, a year or so later, tried it again. Just really kind of going all out, fuck it, I'm just going to draw the book and see how far I can get. And maybe I can put together something resembling a submission. And this is 2005. I'm 26, 27. And, you know, like really going hard on the backgrounds here. I was pretty proud of this, how that turned out. And like, again, you know, like really trying on these backgrounds, like the size of these cars don't really fit these people, but like whatever, it doesn't even matter anymore. Trying to fit in detail wherever I could. Like you can see here, I'm going super hard on getting the perspective right. This is like a grocery store parking lot. Never did finish it, of course, but that's all right. And this is the stuff that isn't on Patreon, just because it didn't really occur to me, to be honest. And yeah, so they bust into the grocery store. Apparently, the first people to think of it. I mean, somebody's got to be first, I suppose, right? Did like shots like this with the axe busting down the glass. There's, you know, like I am putting in the effort, but you can see the style's not. There's still some awkwardness throughout, really. And this is the bit where they're actually in the store. Like some nice shots, you know, stuff like this. Again, still working on those shadows. Some decent figure work. And like, you know, gesture, that kind of thing. But this was as far as this got. And I eventually decided that it wasn't any good. And again, shelved it and didn't really have anything to follow it up with. So I kind of, you know, just kind of shut down any kind of attempts at doing anything with comics. And that would be the case for a long, long time, actually, up until I was about 40. And at that point, my brother let me know that he wanted to take a stab at a comic that was kind of based on my original Blood Run idea. And, you know, we eventually got to the idea where he would write it, I would draw it. And I was like, yes, that I will do all of that. So first decided to try and work out the kinks because I knew there would be a ton of rust. I hadn't drawn any comics in a decade at that point, at least. So decided to kind of redo the scene from Blood Run #2 where they meet the arms dealer. So working out some perspective stuff. Again, there's some stiffness going on. For the most part, the figures aren't too bad. Again, so there's some awkwardness, but you know, it's all right. This is in broad daylight, so there's not much in the way of shadows, and I wasn't really going to worry about shadows yet at this point. And yeah, I still like this panel quite a bit. You get a big old Jeff Darrow head explosion. I'm going to have to work this into Blood Force somewhere. Oh, but I don't know if I can. It's not that kind of book, really, like where it gets gory. So yeah, the arms dealer gets assassinated, and then the Blood Run guys get ambushed, pull up the table to protect themselves, trying to like do a little bit of Dutch angle, but not really, you know, not entirely knowing what to do there. Still, this is a fun bit. And I get the big shot with this character here shooting his way out of it. Just you know, blam, blam, blam. I like this sequence. Kind of reminiscent of Wetworks, actually, with the main shot of the guy firing and then the reaction shots of the impact. I don't mind the tilting of the panels. I think that's pretty good. So like, you know, I'm kind of like trying some shit out, which is a good place to be. And then got boring again on this panel, but I couldn't think of another way to get around it. I think I probably could now. So from there, we got to work on Blood Run #1. And I got like 13, 14 pages of that done. Again, I'm not going to show you too much of it because they are all available on the Patreon. But I'll show you a couple here. So this was going to be page 1. This was after I'd actually gotten a couple pages under my belt and decided that we needed a bit more of a lead up. So going pretty strong on the backgrounds here, not too bad on the perspective, and getting some heavy shadow going and kind of trying to get a little bit of composition in with the panels, because it's something I've never really considered. I just kind of emulate different pages I've seen before. So you got to get the character here leaping against the gigantic moon, right? But yeah, I kind of like this page. I think everything there turned out pretty well. Even the scale with like tiny people on the street here, that ended up looking all right. This is a little later on. This is during a fight sequence, obviously. So two characters have managed to blow up the car here. This guy celebrates because he thinks he's killed the other guy, but the other guy is going to scamper away. And this was probably the first page where I felt pretty happy with all of the end result. This panel in particular was kind of important because originally it was just kind of straight. There was no Dutch angle to it. And then thought, well, wait a minute, what if I just kind of tilt it? And it's like, oh shit, that makes it so much cooler. And yeah, fun page. And yeah, it turned out quite well. I'll just show you a couple more. This was, I think, before I started the issue. This was sort of a let's draw the world kind of idea, because this one was set in the future. And we're going to try and incorporate a whole bunch of future stuff. And there's some small problems with it, mostly with the perspective. I ended up making this street pretty narrow, but I mean, I was still extremely happy with how it turned out. A lot of the detail in the background, I think, ended up looking pretty great. The shadows on everybody, look all right. I don't think there's anything that really stands out too much as like not fitting in. And I think this thing took me 2 or 3 weeks to finish, because I do like half an hour, 45 minutes at a time, and then wander away and then come back to it maybe again later that night and maybe not. And yeah, there's a whole lot of detail in there. And then, yeah, one of the last pages I completed, this is the big deal page. This is the big reveal for when our main character goes out on the street. And this is all just crazy kind of like Transmetropolitan-esque future city background stuff. Again, bit of a problem making the street a bit too narrow. That's something I probably would have focused on going forward, except this was one of the last pages I completed for this. And this, again, took me weeks to do. But like we've got like different levels, because it's flying cars, obviously. There's some, ground level cars mixed in as well. But with the flying ones, you got like these different levels for traffic. You got all these like drone cameras flying around everywhere. There's going to be a lot of like holographic imagery. So I tried to work that in. And this is a detail I came up with, but I kind of liked, where just like there's like these are like older buildings, and they basically just kind of stapled like a living unit to the outside here, where it's just like this would be like the equivalent of like a camper van or something, just kind of duct taped to the side of a building. But yeah, I was super happy with how this one turned out. And then this is one of the last pages I did on it. And this is like one of the last times I did a shit ton of detail in a background. And loved how it turned out. Didn't enjoy drawing it very much at all. It was kind of a slog, and that's one of the reasons it took so goddamn long. But, I mean, like 4 or 5 years later, looking at it, it's like, man, that is a nice page. And then as sort of an epilogue... So after that, this is May of 2021. I was back in a comic drawing vibe, but didn't have a comic to draw. So came up with a couple of ideas, and like, they ran their course. I didn't do, and then went, no, not that one. And this is the only one that I ever did anything with, which is sort of a biography of Neil Gaiman, from a very kind of absurdist, critical point of view, I think. I mean, I think Neil Gaiman's like, all right, he's a good writer. He seems very full of himself, but, that's fine. He's kind of made, staked his claim in the comics industry and, in screenwriting, novels, all that shit. So I guess, he's got that right. So this one was going to be all about just, well, it started out with Neil Gaiman being a self-important douche. I don't think you can see the temporary title here, but it is Fuck Yo Couch, Neil. And the whole deal with this one, Neil Gaiman wanders into a Home Depot, says to the teller, what sort of thing would a genius have? And the teller says, screwdriver, just because you should have a screwdriver. Everybody should have a screwdriver. And Gaiman's like, shut up, I have 7. And then he goes, by the way, days of the week are named after gods. Boom! Your fucking mind's blown. And that pretty much sums up my feelings on Neil Gaiman, I think. But this little strip here, I mean, like I didn't do anything with it, although the 3 pages I did complete are on my Patreon. These were an important thing, I think, to complete, before I started working on Blood Force, because Blood Run got me going, wait a minute, okay, you know what? I can actually still draw. Holy shit, I can draw better than I ever could, which is still like weird. I don't know why that is. But it was a drag sometimes because I was trying really hard to come up with like some interesting compositions and like get everything in perspective properly and work out the shading and get those backgrounds like really detailed. No, more detailed. And I didn't understand pacing or think of it as any kind of priority. So, it's like decompressed storytelling kind of thing. And it did kind of like, I don't know how far we would have got if we had both still wanted to do it, because I think my production would have ground to a halt. So after doing this, where I could do a page in a day super easy, because part of the deal with this particular kind of comic, which I've done from time to time, is that I don't pay a ton of attention to things like backgrounds. There are no backgrounds. What are you talking about? I don't worry about composition. I don't worry about, things looking good in a panel, It's like, no, just get it down. And I think that was kind of important. And a little bit of that ethic carried over into Blood Force, but that ethic is important, to just get it on the page, get it done, move on to the next page. So anyway, I think that'll do it for the little walk down memory lane here. And so we'll just wrap things up now. So that's going to do it for this one. I hope you enjoyed that. I had a fair bit of fun with it. And maybe we'll do another one of those. Obviously, it'll have to be a little bit further down the line. But like in a few months or a year or something like that, we might do that again. So thanks very much for checking this out. I get to do this right to the camera this time. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please hit like, hit subscribe, hit the notifications so you know when the next one's coming up. Go over and subscribe to my Patreon. That'll give you access to everything I do, from the Blood Force stuff, the pages and the finished comics, to these videos before they make it out to YouTube, usually a week or so in advance, maybe, as well as some Patreon exclusive content. You can also follow me on Instagram and DM me there for commissions. Hey, without fucking it up. All right, that'll do it. Thanks again for sending your questions in, guys. That was awesome. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.